All right, welcome back. I am very excited to be with my longtime friends and colleagues, Stefan Gaertner, Kevin Moore. I would say, gentlemen, we are now officially veterans of this space. And so I'm very interested to have what you have to share about on your perspectives of working from home and how data and analytics can shed additional insight on how organizations can take appropriate action and how individuals potentially can take care of themselves and as well as people managers, what can they do to support their workers and their teams. So with that, I'll let you two introduce yourselves. Just so everyone knows, Kevin is going to be off camera until we're through the slides, and then we'll come back and do a Q&A. So Stefan, I'll kick it over to you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Al, and hello, everybody. My name is Stefan Gaertner. I'm now a partner with AON leading global people analytics for us. And boy, what a year this has been in 2020. Much like you, we were all caught off guard, more or less, by a global pandemic and had to quickly reshuffle how we can run our business. During that time, we actually started to talk with a lot of our clients. And what we want to do today is we want to share with you a little bit what our clients are up to. How are they responding to COVID-19 now and in the long run? And we will also talk more deeply about a couple of cases, just to give you an idea what's going on and how people analytics can help. And with me today is Kevin Moore, and I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and hello, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon, or maybe earlier afternoon, or somewhere else in the globe it might be your morning. Anyways, wanted to say welcome, and I'll go ahead and get started. So our brief really is about people analytics perspectives on working from home. So inside the brief, we talk about how our clients are responding to the COVID crisis. We talk about solutions that our firm AON has developed from working from home. We also talk about one specific solution that we have, which is geographical labor cost differentials. And then we're actually going to go into a case study for one of our global technology companies for that specific solution. A lot of us have thought, what is the world after COVID? And people try to determine what it will be, and the world keeps changing so fast that it's really hard to predict. But what we can do is understand how our clients are responding to COVID right now. And so what we did here at AON is we've been doing pulse surveys since the COVID crisis started. And every few months we've been pulsing our clients. And one of our latest surveys had nearly 2,000 participants, and it was really helping us understand how the responses are differing in terms of workforce strategies. So for instance, we found that 23% are accelerating the use of workforce planning, 84% are exploring different working models, 55% are increasing their workforce agility. So these are really types of facts that we found out. This is one of our older surveys, but we have many editions of these that clients and non-clients can actually participate in to really understand what's happening with the crisis. And through our survey, you're actually able to get a readout if you participate in this survey. So I want to talk about now the world after COVID. And so these are the things that we're seeing. And like I said in the beginning, it's not like anybody has a glass ball that can predict everything that will happen. But what we can do is, because we have thousands of clients across the globe, we can give a sense of what we think is happening and what we think will happen. And so I want to talk about these different areas here. So for instance, we have most industries looking at cost savings. So right now we're seeing our clients right size their workforces. We're seeing them decrease real estate footprints, and they're reducing overhead expenses. The next area is working from home. Working from home is the area that we're going to talk about, and we're going to be talking about geographic location differentials when you have people scattered across the United States working from home. So we'll talk more about that area. The next one is product and service digitalization accelerating. I'm sure we all see, you know, there's a lot of innovation going on. Self-driving cars, potentially without people, drone delivery, telemedicine, security cameras. There's a lot of things happening that are accelerating as we come through the COVID crisis. The next thing is markets for people, goods and services are scrambling. What we see there is we're finding that different industries are suffering while certain industries are thriving. For instance, retail has been hit hard, hospitality, but tech is thriving. So it's really kind of changing the dynamics of people, goods, and services. And the last one is employees' health and wellness programs. What's happening is we find that companies are having to deal much more with mental health challenges and trying to create mental health programs as well as physical health programs with people understanding that they're now working from home and their work from home workplace is now the center of business operations. We've developed many solutions here at AON for working from home. And one of those we're actually going to go into today, but I'll discuss a few of the other ones that won't be gone deep into detail today. So the first business problem that we find with clients is you really need to understand the rules and processes that identify the jobs that are working from home. So what are the jobs and what are the types of people that need to be staying at home? In the long run, there needs to be fairness. It can't just be only this percentage of computer engineering workers can work from home, but those that need to be in an operational center can't. They have to go in. You have to create fairness amongst people and jobs. And so that's something that we have been working on. Next thing is the geographic pay differentials, which Stefan is going to walk you through. The next one is thinking about performance management and monitoring changes in productivity. The thing here is people who are working from home, are they just as effective as if they were in the office? There's quite a bit of evidence that we've seen that people working from home may not be as quite productive as they would be in the office. And what are the effects on communication and productivity? And how do you measure performance? That's an area that we've started to really look strongly at AON and really try to understand what are the performance differentials and does working from home make a difference? The next area is looking at tools that connect remote employees to new job opportunities. So we've developed an artificial intelligence tool called the Job Navigator. It really homes in on what job might be right for you based on a certain set of criteria. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Stefan Gaertner, who's going to go into our case study and in more detail and discuss our solutions for geographic labor differentials. Go ahead, Stefan.
Can you hear me? Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. The anecdote that I like to use to start this is when I first met Al all the way back in 2001, as he was saying that we are veterans. He was working at the Gap, I was working at Adamsen, and we were at a people analytics conference where nobody really had anything to say about analytics. A few averages perhaps, a few percentages, and that's all that was there. So what is interesting, and you might be aware of that, compensation benchmarking over the last 40, 50 years has been a lot about averages, medians, not about statistics, not about regression modeling, not about artificial intelligence. And this is going to become very relevant as I'm walking through this particular slide in this particular case, because we were actually starting to question this a few years ago. And that really helps our clients today. So here's what happens. And you might have experienced it at your workplace as well. Somewhere around April 2020, big organizations, especially in large metropolitan areas, realized that the employees, as they had to lock down their corporate offices because of Corona, started to move out of San Francisco, out of New York, out of Los Angeles Metro, and they ended up working maybe more in rural areas because they wanted to be with their family. Maybe they felt safer in Montana than they would in overcrowded San Francisco. And at first, it was all nice and well until people started to realize, what if these people actually start to stay where they are today? What are we going to do then? I mean, realistically, if you live in San Francisco, if you work in San Francisco, you might get 20, 30, 40% more than an employee perhaps in West Texas or in Atlanta, Georgia, simply because cost of living is higher, and more importantly, because cost of labor is a lot higher. So again, if these employees are moving out, wouldn't you have to start paying them less? So here are the problems. I mean, the first one is fairly easy to think about. In 2020, maybe in 2021, most of our clients say, well, we want to understand the problem, but we don't want to reduce pay levels just yet because this is still an emergency situation and we don't want to punish our employees. But on the other hand, other employers, on the other hand, after 2021, there might be a case to say, look, the crisis is over. You still live up there in North Dakota. You have colleagues in North Dakota, and you make 30% more than them simply because you used to live in San Francisco. That doesn't sound fair. So at some point, we have to bring down your pay levels. Now, that was one problem, really figuring out what that means. But the other one was, what kind of data can you actually use to estimate geodifferentials in different parts of the world or a different part of the United States? Because the stuff gets so granular that you can't really slice and dice your way out of it. So something more powerful was needed. And what we basically did there was a multiple regression model. So going to the next slide, Kevin. So I'm going straight into the solution. And we actually looked into different ways to tackle this problem. So you should know that Radford is part of AON, and they have quite amazing data from the technology and life sciences industries. Millions of employee records. And in fact, these employee records don't just include compensation data. We have turnover, we have tenure, we have experience, or we infer experience from the data. We have performance and all sorts of other things. So we basically use this data to run multiple regression models, realizing that to really get to this, we have to start figuring out what the geodifferentials are, not by state, not by city, but all the way down to the county level. And the data gets very thin, and you want to make sure that you start comparing apples with oranges. So for example, you wanted to make sure that you're not comparing more experienced employees in Atlanta with more inexperienced employees in Macon, Georgia, for example. So that's the methodology that we used. And in these multiple regression models, we did a little bit of tinkering with it. But in the end of the day, we did want to keep it fairly simple. And we would include things like work location, experience, tenure, so if you have new hires in the market or not, pay grade and job function. And by the way, before you ask, pay grade and job function is pretty standardized in Radford. So that really helped there. So we combined data from multiple organizations, and we knew because they are all mapped to the same taxonomy, the data points were comparable. And also for this company, for these clients that we worked on, they didn't want to know just the market pay differential. They wanted to actually see what the pay differential was for their particular peer group. So on the right-hand side, you see a few business results and what we learned from there. So the first one was the obvious one. They wanted to know if somebody moves to county XYZ in North Dakota, what is their pay differential relative to San Francisco? And we were able to provide them with that. Turns out that even within the United States, even within tech jobs, in the same grade level, same job function, these geodifferentials can be as much as 40% relative to San Francisco. Secondly, we were able to provide them with detailed tables. We were exploring whether we want to go to the state level, to the MSA level, the metropolitan statistical area level, or county level. Learned in the process that zip code is a little bit too deep, and I'll show you in a minute why. Employees were then mapped into these geographic pay categories. And in fact, what we could do, we could basically compare our client organization's geo-differential with the market to help them figure out where people are over and really also underpaid. And then finally, we were able to also look into other pay components beyond base. If you were asking, turns out that equity pay, stock pay, the pay differential is even bigger than it is for base pay. Let me show you an example, a couple of maps. Next slide. So this is a real map from this project, and you see basically color-coded by county level what the pay differentials are. We don't show these specifically, but certainly if you call us and we can walk you through some of this data. But if you see a very white square there, we're talking about a pay differential of 40%. And this is indexed against San Francisco simply because both of the clients that these cases are based on were headquartered in San Francisco. So you see, for example, that even within state, you see remarkable differences in pay. So, I mean, it's hard to see, it's probably a little bit small here, but you see, for example, that the Atlanta area in Georgia, you talk basically 20%, 15% pay discount relative to San Francisco. But if you go to Northeast Georgia or Southern Georgia, these pay differentials are a lot bigger. That's one of the key things that you get what they got from this project. Another thing that I wanted to point out, especially when you look at the next map, let's go to the next slide, Kevin. We were doing some experimenting all the way down to the zip code level, and you see the results here. And one of the things that we learned doing this work is that zip code level is really too granular. Not because we don't have enough data, yes we do, but at the moment you enter zip code level, you start that the data is being distorted by social demographic differences by each of these locations. So you basically pick up pay levels of rich neighborhoods and pay levels of poor neighborhoods. So as we learned that we did this for this client, we basically realized at the end that once you go to that level, you are probably too deep. A county level is about as far as you want. So one way how they used it, for example, as you're seeing the map here from the San Francisco Bay Area, one key question was, is there in fact a different pay level in San Francisco County when you compare that to Oakland? And I must tell you that that was one of the many examples that you probably all encounter when you do people analytics, which is that sometimes data meets politics, because the data really showed very clearly that there's a pay differential between San Francisco and Oakland of about 10%, whereas the client felt very uncomfortable paying Oakland employees, people who live in Oakland, 10% less. So that's sort of the last thing that I would say, other than once we looked at these zip code maps, one good thing or interesting thing that came out of it is also the realization that there are metropolitan statistical areas where pay level by zip codes are pretty different remarkably, such as in San Francisco and Seattle. But then there were other areas where the differences were much, much smaller. For example, as they were in Boston or Chicago. So I know we don't have a lot of time, and I apologize that I had to start late because of technical difficulties, but maybe we still have time for one or two questions before we part. Regardless, I enjoyed presenting with you. And again, if there are any questions, let us know.
Stefan, Kevin, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And, I'm going to go right to it because there is something that, Stefan, you and I have long talked about. And there's two concepts that I want to introduce that I think is going to be valuable for our community. Number one is this notion of analytical diversity. So if there's a problem that we're trying to solve, the means in which to solve that problem would take someone who is steeped in analytical processes to say, okay, that is an appropriate way to tackle that problem, multiple progression in the example that you highlighted. Not many organizations are going to have somebody with those skills on staff, skills either to select the appropriate analytical technique or to actually in turn go to work, go do that work, because that requires oftentimes specialized technologies. And that goes back to, you know, how we're defining what we're doing, because many times analytics is thought of like from a technology-centric approach, where we're thinking about dashboards and things like that. What you're talking about is you know, a research orientation, where we're actually going to do a study. So my question to you, and if I can direct it to Stefan first, analytical diversity and the idea of outsourcing analytical capability, and it's not meant to be self-serving to AON, it's just opening our mind to say, gosh, if I want to understand that dynamic and solve for that, I might not have to go back to my desk and try and figure it out myself, or direct one of my staff to go do it because he or she might not have the skills. It might be the fact that we have to be an educated shopper, know the ecosystem of capability out there, and maybe contact you and say, you know, give me some help. So, what do you think about that?
Well, you said the word self-serving. I'm always a little bit worried about being too forceful in these moments, because it always comes across as self-serving. But Al, you and I, we were both on both sides, right? We have seen corporate people analytics, and we have seen consulting. And we also know that once you're in corporate people analytics, you also tend to be a little bit defensive of your space. You don't want external people coming in messing with what you're doing.
That's right.
And that's basically how I would answer this. I mean, based on the experience that I have, that you have, Kevin was for many years in corporate as well, we have never come in trying to be forceful and taking over. We help where we can. And sometimes that means technology. Sometimes that means really analyzing data for our clients. And often it means just looking over their shoulder, giving them some tips, making them more effective. And in fact, the latter can be done fairly cheaply. So yeah, I can't complain about my relationships with the people analytics community. Sometimes we do any of this, or we just provide data. And one of the things that I always point out, it's been 20 years, you said we are veterans now. When I go back 20 years ago, I'm very pleased to see that you and I actually have a career in this space, right? Then it was not at all obvious, because we spend 90% of our time actually justifying of our existence. And happily, luckily, this is not the case anymore. I know we're a little bit over time, but Kevin, I want to give you a chance to say something too here.
Yeah, and Kevin, I want to take that same question, and we're okay on time because we have a break right now, so we're not putting anybody out. So, you know, Kevin, same question, but I also want to put this in a wrapper. Like Radford and AON in general, but Radford specifically has data that's way beyond what's in an enterprise. And so to juxtapose what is in an organization with the Radford data specifically is of unique value. So can you speak to, you know, the creativity that can be employed given the resources and data that you have access to?
Sure, and I appreciate the comment that you make, Al, and Stefan, about, you know, when you're a people analytics leader, you're definitely cautious about consultants coming in. You kind of think that you know best. I served as a people analytics leader twice within industry before I came to AON, and I can tell you what AON offers is not to come in here and tell you this is how you need to do things. It's offer complementary services to really help accelerate the people analytics team. So let me give you an instance. So Al was talking about our data. I really feel that through our Radford brand, we're one of the best in the world in terms of life sciences and tech, compensation and HR metrics and benchmark data. And so you may be doing an HR scorecard. I'll give you an instance. And you're all completely set on the measures you want to use, but you don't know how you compare to, let's say, tech software companies greater than 5,000. Well, you come to us. we can give you a tool that provides you all of those benchmarks, and you can really understand what is your people risk relative to those benchmarks. So an instance would be looking at your turnover or your spans and layers. How do you compare versus companies versus your exact industry and headcount size? So that's where we can really help in terms of the data assets. And then we have a number of solutions that really kind of come on top of what you do. We may bring in a software solution that can accelerate the way that you do workforce planning. We can do deep dives in terms of pay equity and work from a legal standpoint in areas that you may not want to or be asked to touch because of the legalese around it. And then really trying to accelerate your team in terms of figuring out what are the processes, technology, people, and governance that you should have to get started in people analytics. So with that said, Al, it's really it's complementary. We don't have any projects at AON where we're outsourcing the work where we actually become the people analytics team. Normally our engagements are limited term duration engagements where we're helping for a very specific reason.
Well, thank you for sharing it so eloquently, because it is the case as we move forward and the demands on people analytics practitioners increases. I believe their capability being augmented by the likes of you is going to be increasingly important, particularly as the proliferation of, for lack of a better term, external data, gets wider and wider, and the tools to consume that, analyze it. There's got to be some flex, and there's got to be some specialists that you go to, within your ecosystem of work. So I am, congratulations on the work that you're doing and what you've achieved. As we start to wrap here, how can people learn more about what you both are doing and connect with you individually?
Yeah, you won't believe it. I actually have a second presentation to go to right now, but send us an email.
Okay.
Send us an email, stefan.gaertner@aon.com. Kevin, what's your email address?
It's kevin.l.moore@aon.com.
All right. And I imagine we can find you on LinkedIn as well, yeah?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Surprise, surprise. All right, gentlemen. You have a great one. Thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Good one.